guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my April reading wrap up. These are all the books that I read in the month of April, either physically or on audiobook. And I read 14 books again this month. I read 14 books in March and I read again 14 books. And I am blaming it on the fact that I can do nothing other than stay home and read. It's like work, home, and that's the life of being in quarantine. So like always, I'm going to start with my stats first. My reading goal for 2019 was to read 75 books, and I am well over halfway done. Right now I have 34 books left to read, and so I have 9 months to read 34 books, which if I'm going at the way I'm going, I'm gonna hit 75 books in no time at all. So, and then for my A to Z reading challenge, I have 15 letters left and I read 5 letters. Not great considering I read 14 books, but I have a lot of repeat letters. And then from the Pop Sugar reading challenge, I completed 5 prompts. So we're gonna go through those as well. So really quickly before I get into the books, somebody was asking me on my last wrap up and I never responded, and I'm sorry. Every time I meant to respond, I kind of got sidetracked. They were asking how I know about these challenges. For the A to Z reading challenge, that's just something that I have been doing for years. A little nerd in me, maybe 7-8 years ago, decided to, hey, I want to read a letter of the alphabet, a book for every letter of the alphabet, and that kind of just made it my own. I'm not saying that I created it, but I didn't look for this challenge from anybody. It's just something that I said to myself, I want to read a book for each letter of the alphabet, and I've kind of been doing that every year. When it comes to the Pop Sugar reading challenge, one year, at the end of the year, I just kind of Google Pop Sugar challenge for the year 20 whatever, and then it pops up with that article, and then I just write down the prompts and I try to read those books and share with you guys my progress throughout the monthly wrap-ups. But yeah, that's kind of how I go about for the reading challenges. But anyway, I'm going to start with my A to Z books that I completed. The first one that I finished, where'd it go? Okay, is for the letter D, and for that I read The Diviners by Leva Bray. This book was a reread for me. I read this book a few years ago and I remembered nothing. All I remembered was that I didn't like it, but I didn't know why, and I still don't know why, because I really enjoyed it. This is a supernatural mystery type novel set in the 1920s. We follow this girl Evie who gets in trouble for spreading a rumor about a wealthy family in Chicago. Is that where she's from? But as a punishment, she is sent to live with her uncle in New York. And I say punishment because she was very excited. Her parents thought that they were punishing her by sending her to live to New York, but she is actually very excited about going to New York and live with her uncle, because New York is just the fancy city. It's an up-and-coming city and everybody's talking about New York. And so she goes to move with her uncle, but it turns out that Evie has an ability. People with these abilities are called diviners, and her uncle is at the at the front of this whole movement with these diviners and all these supernatural creepy things that are going on. And so we follow her story from there. And like I said, I don't know why I didn't like it the first time. Maybe I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. The next letter that I finished was for the letter H, and that is Homefront by Kristen Hanna. I absolutely love this book. We follow this lady. What is her name? Sorry guys, I read a lot of books, so I kind of tend to forget the names. But we follow the story of Michael and Jolene. They are a couple whose marriage is falling apart. Jolene is in the reserves, I think, but she's enrolled and they call her to go to war. And kind of when she finds out that she has to go to war, Michael tells her that he doesn't love her anymore and he wants a divorce. And at the same time, she tells him, well, I'm going to war, so you're gonna have to watch the kids. So their marriage is falling apart when she goes to war. And of course, when she comes back, she has PTSD from something that happened to her during the war. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it. Kristen Hanna's books are worth going in knowing nothing, because I'm certain you'll love it. I've loved every single book that I've read from her, and I'm happy because this book has a happy ending. Usually her books are very like heart-wrenching, and they just leave you sad and depressed. But this one, like, it'll leave you sad and depressed, but it kind of redeems itself at the end. So really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The next letter that I finished was the letter L, and that went to The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I read Final Girls and I loved it, and this book I really enjoyed as well. In this book, we follow this lady named Vivian, who, when she was a teenager, she went to a summer camp and something happened to all her cabin mates, and she was the only one who survived. And like, people started saying things about what they thought happened, and she was always very looked at as being suspicious that she was the only one who survived and her not remember anything that happened. So she's very traumatized about these things that happened, and so she, you know, grows up. Like, years later happened, and she gets a call from the people from the camp because they're trying to reopen the camp, because after her season, the camp closed because of the things that happened. So they're trying to revamp the camp, and they think that it's a good idea if she goes back to be a camp counselor. And she agrees. She thinks it's a good way, I guess, to have closure in regards to what happened. So she goes back, but then things start happening again. So it's a nice thriller. It has a lot of twists and turns that I didn't see coming. I really enjoyed it, and I recommend it. If you like thrillers, I think this is a good one. Then for the letter S, I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book has been hyped up so much, and I'm glad that I finally got to read it. And it's nothing what I thought it would be. Like, absolutely nothing. It's completely different, but I still enjoyed it. I didn't love it because I was expecting something different, but I did really enjoy it, and I read it super fast. We follow Evelyn Hugo, who is a star, and she's dying, and she wants to kind of publish her autobiography, and she hires a reporter to help her write her story. And so we learn about her 7 husbands and why she had 7 husbands. So it was really good, like I said, very entertaining, and I would recommend it. And then lastly, for the A to Z, I always include a number, like I want to read a book with a number. And I completed that one by reading 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. And this is probably my least favorite book of the month. I gave it 3 stars. It's a chick lit rom-com romance book, but I found this kind of boring. We follow Darcy and Tom, who are the love interests, and then Darcy's brother, Jamie, I think is his name. Yeah, Jamie. And so Jamie and Darcy inherit this cottage, and they hire Tom to kind of renovate the cottage. And it's one of those kind of like forbidden, like friends to lovers story. But the only thing keeping them apart is not only their business relationship, because they hire Tom to do the renovating, but also that he is Darcy's brother's best friend. And it just, the conflict within this book seemed pretty stupid to me. Like, come on, that's not, like, what they were saying was a problem was really not a problem. And then at the end, like, the conflict resolved kind of by itself. Like, none of the main characters did anything about it. It just kind of like, they were kind of like, okay, let's just move on. But there was no real, like, let's talk about it, let's fix it. They were kind of like, okay, we're over it. What was a problem before is not a problem anymore. And yeah, I was kind of like just uninterested. I didn't care about the characters. So yeah, I was kind of like let down. I mean, I read it because it read super fast, but I didn't care about any of the characters, sadly. Now, very quickly, I'm going to run through the prompts that I completed from the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge. The first one was a book recommended by a blog, podcast, book club, etc. And for that, I went with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because I feel like everybody and their mother was recommending this book a couple years ago, and with good reason. The next prompt is a book about or by a journalist, and for that I went with a nonfiction book. This is Brain on Fire by Susanna Callahan. This is a story it's kind of like an autobiographical story. Is that a word, biographical? And where she discussed, she got sick with, what is the disease called? It doesn't say here, but she had this disease, and she could not get, she kept getting wrongly diagnosed because nobody knew what was wrong with her. And unfortunately, all her symptoms were justified by other diagnoses. So she was being treated for seizures. She was being treated for anxiety. She was being treated for schizophrenia. Like, they were just medicating her in hopes that she would get better, and she wasn't getting better. She was actually getting worse. And so finally she gets diagnosed. I forget what she was diagnosed with, and unfortunately it doesn't say in the back because of course they're not gonna give it away. But it was very, very scary. There's a picture because it says motion picture. There's a movie, I think, on Netflix about this. So I wanted to read this book before I read the movie. I wanted to read this book before I watched the movie. And but it's scary because as someone who works in the healthcare field, it's scary. Like, people expect you to have an answer for everything, and unfortunately sometimes we don't. And sometimes your symptoms can be masking like your disease by pretending to be something else, especially if your condition is not very common or not very widely seen or diagnosed. So this is super, super good. I can't wait to watch the movie, and hopefully I'll like it as much as this one. It's scary. I can't imagine something scarier than you feeling sick, having symptoms, and nobody believing you and thinking that something different is wrong with you. It's a very scary concept, and it happened to her. It's a very small book, but it's so entertaining, and it's kind of like, I feel bad for saying that it was entertaining, but it was very interesting. Let's put it that way. The next prompt that I finished was a book set in the 1920s, and for that was The Diviners by Leva Bray. The next prompt that I completed was your favorite prompt from last year's reading challenge, and I went with an easy one. Not necessarily my favorite one, but that was a reread, and for that I went with City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. I read another book by Cassandra Clare that's set in the Shadowhunter world, and I realized how little I remembered from the series, and I have just purchased Queen of Air and Darkness to finish reading the last trilogy that she wrote before I start the new series that she just came out, Chain of Gold or something like that. And yeah, I realized how little I remembered. So I was kind of like rereading summaries online, and it kind of wasn't helping. So I just decided to read the whole trilogy series again. They're all on my Overdrive library, so I'll just be listening to the audiobooks. But yeah, this book was a reread. We follow what is her name, Clary Frey, who finds out that she is a shadow hunter on her birthday, and we follow her adventures. This series was super, super popular many years ago. Like I said, I have read all the books, but I was reading a collection of short stories from one of the characters, and I found myself not really remembering. And then I started watching the show on Hulu, which is terrible. It's a terrible show, terrible acting. And I was kind of remembering, but I just wanted the experience to go through the whole story again. So I read the first book. I'm going to be reading the second book in May. But yeah, that's this one. And the last prompt that I finished was a book by an author who has written 20 or more books. And for that, I went with Sworn to Silence by Linda Castillo. She writes, it's a series of murders within the Amish community. And it's the Kate Burkholder series. I was looking like on Goodreads to see how, because this series alone is 12 books. And then she has like novellas in between some of the books. And then so I looked at all her books, and she's written like almost 40 books. So yay, happy coincidence. So yeah, this story follows Detective Kate Burkholder, and she grew up within the Amish community. Amish community, is that how you say it? Yeah. She grew up within the Amish community, but she left the community just because, I guess, it wasn't for her. It wasn't something that she wanted to continue with. And now she's a police officer, and there was a murder and she is called upon to investigate what's happening. So I actually read the first book and the second book. The second book is Pray for Silence. And it's just another, they're both murders within the Amish community, but like for different reasons. But these books are so good, you guys. Trigger warnings for everything: murder, torture, sodomy, you name it, it's in here. They're very not descriptive, disturbing. So I would approach these with caution, because they are very descriptive and very disturbing, and I think that adds to the experience of reading this book. I felt like I was watching like an episode of Law and Order, SVU. So yeah, really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I have, I think, 4 or 5 of these, so I can't wait to dive into books 3, 4, and 5, and hopefully I can get caught up. I know she just released book 11 or 12 maybe. No, 12, yes. So I'm just excited to read and get caught up. And the good thing is that her books are not very big. They're kind of like the average length, like about 320 pages. So that's good. They're really good. I highly recommend if you like crime books. I think those are really great. And then last but not least, I have 5 books that don't fit either a prompt or a letter for the A to Z challenge. The first one that I have here on top is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I really enjoyed this book, but just as with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, this book had been hyped so much for me that I was expecting something different than what I got. I wasn't expecting the relationship from Achilles and Patroclus to be what it was here in this book. I am not familiar with Greek mythology very well, so I don't know if it's the author who took the liberty of taking that approach with these 2 characters, or that it's actually something that has been in history proven, you know? But I was expecting the relationship like in Troy, that movie Troy with Brad Pitt and Orlando Bloom. But this is kind of like the story of Troy, but told from Patroclus's point of view. And then it's really good. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. It read super fast again, but I was just expecting something different than what I got. Even though I still enjoyed it, I only gave it 4 stars because it wasn't up to the hype that I was expecting it to be. Then I read another nonfiction book. This is The Girl with the Lower Back Tattoo from Amy Schumer. This book was okay. I'm not a fan of Amy Schumer, but I've read like Tina Fey's, Mindy Kaling, Ellen DeGeneres, like people that I'm not like necessarily a fan of, but because they're like funny people, I feel like they would write funny books, and for the most part they deliver. And this was funny on some parts, but just because she can come across a little bit crass, and it's just like some parts in the book like rubbed me the wrong way. So I wasn't necessarily like the biggest fan of this book, but there were parts that I did find really funny, and the parts that had a lot of heart, to be honest, especially when she talks about her family and her dad, and when she gets serious about certain topics. I really enjoyed those parts when she's talking about when she's being young and just being like boy crazy, and the things she did that I didn't really care for or enjoy. So for that reason, I gave this 3. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it if you want to read it, but I wouldn't say go out and buy it. It's super funny, but that's just my personal opinion. Then the next book that I have here is The Bank Chronicles. This is the book that I was telling you guys that I was reading. This follows Magnus Bane. He is a warlock, a downworlder in this whole Mortal Instrument series. He's like he's like hundreds of years old, and we follow different stories of him throughout his lifetime, his long lifetime. And there are some references that I found here in this book from within the story. So you kind of, if you're reading the other books, you get mentioned of certain things, and then this book kind of tells you the full story that you've kind of heard throughout the other books. But like I said, I didn't quite remember a lot of the significance of certain things and events, and that's why I was like, well, I'm reading the story, but it really doesn't really matter to me. And this book is what made me want to reread The Mortal Instruments, which is why I read City of Bones. But I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 stars just because I don't get the significance of certain stories, but this is a good one. It's a nice addition to the whole collection of The Mortal Instruments. So I think it wouldn't hurt you to read it if you read the whole series. That's what I'm trying to say. Then I also read Lethal White by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. This is the 4th book in the Cormoran Strike detective series. This is a big hunker of a book. I definitely listened to the audiobook on this one. And I can't say much because it's the 4th story in this. It's the 4th book in the series. But Cormoran Strike is a detective. He's kind of like a lone detective. He kind of works alone. He has like the people that he works with, but he's mainly like a lone person. This book though, however, felt a little bit too long. I think there are some things from the story that would have been okay to like cut them off. I feel like they weren't needed to tell the story, but it's a solid murder mystery book again. And I can't say much because it follows kind of like the series of the other 2. So really enjoyed it. I think you can still read it. It's not necessary that you read the other 3. However, for the character development, it's not necessary for the plot, but for the character development and the things that the characters go through, I think it's important just so you can see where they're coming from. But I really enjoyed this book. I would continue reading these books if she keeps coming out with them. I liked it. It was a good, solid one. And last but not least, I read Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. This is the 4th book in the, I guess, Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I think the 4th book and last book just came out. So I'm excited to get my hands on that one. But this is another like mystery thrillery type. I've read a lot of like mystery thriller books. That's been my kick lately apparently. But in this book we follow Rose. She's coming from Europe onto the United States on a boat, and she is on board with Houdini. And a lot of things start happening. A lot of people start disappearing, getting hurt, and so it's up to her and her uncle and her like boyfriend to figure out what is happening, why are these things happening to these people, and of course Houdini is at the center of all these disappearings and things that are happening. So very fun read super fast. Again, I think you do need to read the first 2 books for continuity's sake. It's not like Lethal White that you can just pick up from there. This one I feel like you do need to read the other 2, but they're very fun and very engaging. That makes them read really fast, even though they're kind of on the bigger side, about 400 plus pages. But they're very entertaining. I really did enjoy it. So there you go, guys. Those are the books that I read in the month of April. We'll see what May brings. Maybe I'll just read bigger books, and hopefully I can get, oh, I forgot. My goal was to read 12 500-page books in 2020, and I am happy to say that I read 3. Thank God, because I was getting behind. So I read the Bank Chronicles. That was over 500 pages. The Diviners was also over 500 pages. And Lethal White was also over 500 pages, which brings me a total of 4 books, which means I'm all caught up. I had only read 1, and so I'm trying to read 1 a month. So I was able to get caught up this month, which I'm very happy. And hopefully in May, I will be able to do the same thing. So now that's the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys are still here, you guys are brave. I promise I will try to make this edited down as much as possible. But I'll see you guys later. Bye.